Okay, we are live streaming. Would you like to do the ceremonial testing of the microphone?
Test one. Test two. Chew. 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 Chew.
And that set the dog off barking, of course. Of course. Okay, I think we're doing okay right now. Let me turn off one thing on this computer, which might be alien a tiny bit because I just have too many things going on. It's called tab bankruptcy. I think I need to declare in my browser, among other things. Let me close this too.
Some interesting stuff. I didn't know that.
I know.
Wow.
It's fascinating, right? All this desktop clutter. Oh my gosh, and it goes on and on. Anyway, hello everybody. We got a few people who have joined us live. Welcome. We're back for another episode of Don't Let It Go. And today I'm asking you, I don't always ask you, but you have to now go over to don'tletitgo.com, which is my blog, don'tletitgo.com. Why? Because today, for the first time since we relaunched, I actually put together this elaborate list of program notes so that you can actually check out the articles and things that I have in mind for us to refer to and discuss today. So go ahead and grab those. Yeah, we were running around like crazy before. Why? Because when I do this, when I start making program notes, I just go on and on. It's like a whole rabbit trail for every episode. I could just keep adding more and more links, but I did try to control myself. Go ahead and check it out over there. If you're here live on YouTube now, you've already seen the title, Is There a Moral Duty to Disobey an Unjust Law? And that is our slated topic for today. Of course, we're going to discuss unjust laws in the context of vaccine mandates, and in particular, the anticipated mandate to vaccinate children with the COVID vaccine. So that's kind of the context. But as I said, if you go to don'tletitgo.com, which is one of the many tabs I've got open up here, I believe, then you can see the context that I have in mind, all the different articles and things. The main inspiration came from this video from JP Sears. To people who are offended easily, even the screen grab for the JP Sears video that inspired today's show might be a little bit off-putting for you, but yeah, he likes to dress in outrageous ways in various types of characters, I guess in order to make things jarring. Speaking of which, I do want to get, if I ever can get those GFDA guys to come and talk about, the reason that they do what they do with their profanity and their motivational stuff. But yeah, sometimes the idea of jarring people visually or maybe with a piece of profanity gets their attention to think about a point. I think that's probably part of what he does there.
Well, he's a comedian too.
Yeah.
I did plan to ask him where he got the bra, but we'll see.
You forgot, right?
We'll see if he's willing to disclose that.
Maybe at another time. So the video was called New Mandates, and he talks about 4 mandates coming your way. And it's one of his more sobering videos. And in addition to the sort of comedic part of it, which again, it's so sobering, it's hard to laugh, but at the, he goes out of character. He just is in his own skin at the end, and just giving a heartfelt plea, in effect, to disobey unjust laws. And he talks about the importance of disobeying unjust laws. And he refers to the famous letter from Birmingham Jail of Martin Luther King, in which King does say, he asserts that there is a moral duty. He says there's a moral duty to disobey an unjust law. And this is something that I have usually argued against for reasons that I'll explain in a minute. And I think I might still, hold that position that there is not a moral duty to disobey an unjust law. And, in general, because I'm an objectivist, that I follow Ayn Rand's philosophy, I don't think that anything is a moral duty per se, right? You can say whether something is morally right for you to do or not? Is it morally right for you to disobey an unjust law, is the way that you might put it?
Well,
is it in your self-interest to disobey all unjust laws?
So probably implicit in using the term duty is that there will be a cost for you, right? And
significant of some kind, yeah.
So that also highlights a number of things that you cannot really look at these options and call them choice, right? Because if you find yourself having to choose, quote unquote, between keeping your job and being vaccinated, even if you have personal concerns, whatever they are, or it can be the absence of concerns. Figuring you're in your 20s, you are healthy, and so it just doesn't make any sense to seek additional insurance of a limited kind,
right?
Plus the fact that you don't know what the long-term effects might be. So anyway, so finding yourself in a situation like that, how fair is it to speak of choice, right? It's not a choice at all. So you're maneuvered in a position where you lose anyway. So if you allow me my personal introduction, which is sort of funny because sometimes it seems my life as a student at the moment runs sort of parallel to events in the world. So yeah, well, maybe I'm going crazy. Anyway, so yesterday evening I got at a stage where I will have to dive into the discussion about religious toleration, and we're talking about the 17th century. Of course, you imagine this is at a stage where Europe has seen many wars and many deaths, civil wars as well, on issues of religion. And now I'm going to dive into the pleas that were formulated to defend toleration and dissent in a way that at least you would keep the peace. Of course, this is an intellectual development that culminated, if you wish, in the Declaration of Independence itself, right? Where the formula is that government has no status in declaring what is right morally. I mean, rights are rights.
Yeah, other than the violation of individual rights. Yeah.
So it's not an arbiter of truth. And that's my perspective. This whole idea of so one thing, what we're dealing with is lack of debate through the, let's say, the official channels of what the real risks are of the Rona, of the virus. Lack of debate about what possible treatments are. Lack of debate what the real benefits and side effects are of vaccines.
Right.
So in this whole amorphous soup, which we're wading through, of course, it doesn't stick to a discussion on truth and untruth. No, because your dissent is now becoming a sign of or a signal for moral condemnation.
Right.
And that is really maybe inevitable. Maybe that's the nature of the beast. The other guy, he cannot simply be wrong. He has to be wrong and immoral and so this is sort of my perspective. And
your perspective is that you've seen this happen many times, not just in this context with respect to coronavirus and people choosing not to vaccinate, et cetera, that time and again, people will get involved in movements and they will condemn people who disagree with them this way about a variety of topics, right? So you don't just make the wrong dietary choices, you are a terrible person because you choose to eat animals.
Sure. So everything becomes ideological. Everything becomes, formerly it was the custom because everything was religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we had the 20th century where, in a number of places, everything became socialism. And I sincerely thought, we left that behind us. But it seems more or less when the Soviet Union threw the hat in the ring and gave up on their belief in the socialist paradise, that the need for purpose, for direction, is something that is filled in these situations of real or perceived crisis.
Right, and that was something that Matthias Desmet, whom we interviewed several weeks ago, talks about as well. So we can keep going to that forever as well. But so circling back to this, is there a moral duty to disobey an unjust law? I saw this, and I used to teach Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham Jail as part of philosophy of law classes every semester. I really enjoy teaching it, not only because of this particular issue, which is an interesting issue, right? I think any of us would agree, probably if you're watching the show, you would agree that it is morally permissible, it is morally justified to disobey an unjust law. But the interesting question was, is there a moral duty to do it or not, which is what Martin Luther King alleged and what JP Sears argued for in that video earlier this week. And again, that got me intrigued. I always thought, first of all, there's no quote moral duty. So you had to talk about whether it was morally proper, whether there was some sort of significant cost if you did not disobey an unjust law. And I pretty much found Rand's answer to this issue to be satisfactory to me, which was that you have a moral duty to speak out against an unjust law. But so, for example, let's talk about taxes, right? There's the income tax is a horribly unjust thing. There was a few years ago, everybody talking about taxation as theft. Wouldn't it be great if we could be back to the days where the biggest thing that we could be talking about right now is taxation as theft? And now it's whether or not the government should be mandating experimental jabs in your arm, right? We're so far down the road, but yeah, remember the taxation as theft days. It is theft, right? It is unjust to have compulsory taxation. There are ways that you could finance all the proper functions of government through voluntary taxation. And yet Rand and most people paid and pay their taxes every year as owed, right? You pay them. Why? Because there are penalties that you would go to jail and otherwise. And the way that Rand used to discuss it, that she would obey the laws fastidiously. She would, go through and, dot every I and cross every T, etc. And at the same time, go out in the world and argue as to why this is unjust. So she would do it, but she would do it under protest, and she would vocalize her protest. She would make her protest known. So that was her view. And she was saying, you know, there's so many unjust laws and disobeying them have such consequences. And the chance that you would achieve anything towards your goal of having the unjust law repealed is very small when you're sitting in jail, et cetera. You know, she would weigh that with respect to any. Now, I don't think that it's like she'd always obey you know, unjust laws. I think she would choose which ones to disobey, which ones to obey. And you make this calculation as to whether you can best achieve the goals that you have in your life, which are not short-term goals, not goals of mere comfort, et cetera. You know, she went out and said all sorts of things, regardless of how unpopular she was. She made kinds of decisions that put her ability to get her books published and everything at risk. You know, she made decisions that caused her discomfort in order to achieve goals that were important to her. But she would weigh those things and say, okay, you know, if I think long term over the course of my life and my ability to achieve goals, then what is going to best serve my interests? And she judged with respect to, for example, taxation at the time, that it wasn't going to serve her interests to not pay her taxes, wind up in jail. Similarly, with the acceptance of Social Security payments, which people always criticize her for, she paid into the system her whole life. And then for her to not take the payments while she's still, again, speaking out against the system later, she thought that would be wrong. That wouldn't be, you know, in her self-interest to do. So she did not think there was a moral duty to resist every unjust law that there is. It made sense to me. Now, what was JP's argument? What did you I was hearing you were just watching it just before. What did you take his argument to be?
You're asking me.
Yeah.
You should have asked JP. No, but gee, I have something of an answer if that's what you'd like to hear.
So I'll tell you what I think his argument is.
Okay.
So the way I saw his argument, which you know, it struck me as at least one more thing to think about when you think about whether you should just go ahead and obey it for pragmatic reasons, or, I mean, not necessarily even pragmatic reasons, but rationally self-interest reasons. This is something for you to put into your calculations of pros and cons. Some decisions are very difficult. You can say, is this in my rational self-interest now to go for this, to do that, to resist this, to push for a change in that? And it can be difficult to make these decisions. What he brought to my mind is something that at the very least you need to think about in your calculations of these things, which is this, that if we obey the unjust law and we keep obeying these unjust laws and we don't resist them, we don't disobey them, then we are in effect allowing ourselves to be trained to keep obeying these laws that are unjust. We think of ourselves as a person who can be subjugated in effect. Now, he didn't say it at this length at all. He said it very briefly, and I can't remember the exact words he uses, but it made me think, right? Because you certainly don't want to get yourself into the habit of putting up with injustice, to think of yourself as a person who is owed injustice, who can expect injustice, and that you see yourself as somebody who doesn't have the strength and the resilience, you know, to be able to resist injustice. And to me, that was powerful. You know, certainly if some people don't resist this in some way, then it's going to perhaps encourage further violations of our rights, etc. So yeah. What do you think of this? What does it add to the equation?
I personally, I look at it from a different perspective. And again, that's also something that is linked to my studies. Concretely, these principles, right, of non-aggression, of the individual right to determine your own values and to pursue them. It means that other people will have different ideals from yours, and that they will have different assessments in these situations than you. But the point is, and that is, you know, the fake Voltaire quote that we used to see every week and twice on Sundays.
Well, this week in particular is free speech week,
you know, that I disagree with your opinion, but I'll fight to the death for your right to express your views. That this is really one of the most relevant approaches to this whole situation, because the fact that you may personally think that it is your best interest to get vaccinated, to use a completely random example right now, it doesn't mean that for that reason you shouldn't stand up for that other person who, for reasons that are entirely his own or her own, chooses not to, and faces all sorts of pressures and threats for not doing so. And that is what, you know, living in an open society means, that you see in the other person's rights and the possibility to exercise them confirmation of your own liberties. And with this whole bipolar culture that has formed around the identity politics, and, you know, of course, that's something that we get more information about too, you know, the algorithms that necessarily organize everything and everybody according to bipolar choices. So in that situation, it seems that, you know, and I'll take you to task as well on the whole Beyond Meat thing. You know, the more the merrier, and the more opinions, the merrier. So
no, sure. I'm fine if Beyond Meat wants to exist. What I don't like is that the vegan community in particular likes to shame those of us who actually eat animal meat, right? And so that's part of it. And then, of course, there's the other thing about the USDA actually investing in so-called alternative meat, which is scary. But so, you know, again, getting back to the sort of the main question, is there a moral duty? I would say no, there's not a moral duty. I would say at the very least, if you have an unjust law, you would need to speak out against it, even if you're
then my modulation is you have a moral duty to speak out for the other guy's rights, in the sense that defending the rights of somebody you disagree with is what is the, you know, the foundation of your own. And so that is something that I think, you know, if we want to come up with a holistic message, because, you know, you've been nagging about, I want a holistic message this week. And I'm just joking. Anyway,
you mean that we have to agree or something?
No. But you know, of course, that's the other theme about the 30% of people who still keep their wits about them and who look at the wide range of ideological pressures everywhere around them these days. So 30% being sort of impervious to it, and that the fact that you will find these people in all walks of life and all ideologies. So holistic in the sense of, you know, reaching out across the aisles. yeah, that would be my takeaway, because it doesn't really matter for what reasons somebody wishes to exercise his right not to be vaccinated, concretely in this case.
Right.
It doesn't matter. What matters is that they have those rights just as you do. So that would be my takeaway. So speaking out on behalf of people who, you know, who are already facing choices or alleged choices that that are terrible to deal with.
Robert, thanks, Robert. There he adds, and I want to thank Gail from earlier, by the way, but thanks, Robert, for the super chat here. He says, do you have a moral duty to refuse to participate in an injustice?
I will define participate.
Well, so I think what he has in mind, because there's another wrinkle to the issue of Ayn Rand accepting Social Security payments. She had said that were she to refuse them, then that is needless martyrdom on her part, because she had contributed into the system all of her life. And so therefore for her to refuse the payments at that juncture, well, I mean, of course, we all know that she has been, she had been her whole life an outspoken critic of the entire social welfare system, including Social Security. So that is the, you know, the measure right there is, you know, are you speaking out against it? Your martyrdom is not required. And there's an essay called A Question of Scholarships, which I haven't looked at for quite some time, but it contains all of this, where she talks about the issue of, you know, scholarships that exist for kids. And maybe you think that this particular scholarship system, especially if they're government scholarships, they shouldn't exist. It starts to get really weird though, because now the thing that's come to my mind, for example, is the fact that all the grants in medical research these days, not all of them, but a whole lot of them are made by government. The ones that aren't, right, the ones that are made by big pharma might actually be grants possible due to cronyist contracts with government. It is starting to get really muddy these days, right? So even answering some of these questions, you know, is it pure martyrdom if you refuse, etc.? It is muddy. It's really muddy. But in any event, so the idea is, I am saying, you know, I still stand to my older view, which is that no, there's no moral duty to disobey an unjust law, but that we definitely have additional things to think about today. And in particular, another I know someone named Valkyrie, and we call her Ree. It's Bree in the chat here. So welcome back to the chat. Don't let it go. I think Bree is she, but I'm not 100% sure. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. The problem is that politicians know that they can't take all your rights away at once. So they take small steps. We should oppose even the smallest step. And I would agree with that. We have to oppose even the smallest step. But then the question is, in that opposition, does that mean you have to engage in civil disobedience of the type that's going to land you in jail, etc., or is vocal opposition enough? And I'm saying that vocal and very self-conscious opposition would be enough. If, you know, so for example, as you're sending off your tax return every year, bringing it really home to you how much money the government is stealing from you and why you're choosing to do this, and that you do oppose it. I mean, you know, you don't have to make a huge song and dance and a big ceremony and a shrine and, you know, whatever about it, but to just really have that moment of focus where you register in your mind that you're choosing to do this under protest, that you are fighting it, that you do not see yourself as somebody who should be subjected to injustices routinely through your life, and you're not inviting more of this, that you're pushing back in every way that you know how within the context of your goals. That's kind of my view. And then we'll talk about the particular application here in a second with respect to, in particular, the mandate to vaccinate children that's coming down the pipe, and it's already in California.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Additional thoughts on that? You would
Yeah,
add a wrinkle or two?
Many. So one thing is, what's a small step, right? So that's different for all of us.
Mhm. That's why you have to take into account your particular choices and values
yeah,
in your own life.
this all exactly, and this also, with respect to Robert's comment about, where do you end up in martyrdom? That, of course, is the main question for you as an individual, because, unless that is your life's dream to become a martyr for one cause or another, but seriously, so to make the most of your life, living it is probably the best goal. So
we have so little time, on this planet, and you've got to spend it in all the ways that you think are the most valuable to you, to the best that you can. And today, I feel like I said, putting together the show notes today, there are so many things to be outraged about that are unjust today. You have to pick your shots. You have to pick your shots. And so you have to do it, I think, according to your own hierarchy of values. JP, I know he's obeying some laws, and probably some laws that he finds unjust, right? I wanted to get him on the show. I'd like to get him on the show at some point, but I would ask him, certainly he knows that there are some laws that he's obeying that he knows are unjust. And how do you make that decision? You can only do what you can do within your capabilities. You try to decide which ones are important given your hierarchy of values to go ahead and disobey. Other ones you're going to speak out vocally against. Other ones you're going to sometimes speak out against, sometimes not, maybe not really loudly, just to friends, whatever, but even to yourself. I mean, the most important person to speak about this is to yourself, right? So again, the thing that struck me about what JP said is what it does to you, what it makes you feel like, that you are training yourself to accept injustice. And that's the thing that I think is so important to resist. But there are more ways to resist it than the outward disobedience way. There are a number of ways. I was go back again to Frankl. If you want to, I have not read his book. I've heard so much about his book, Viktor Frankl, but he talks about, just so privately resisting the worst horrors imaginable.
And I think that's for most of us. If you think life should be enjoyed, there's a limit also to the focus you want to place on bad things. Exactly, if you do not believe martyrdom is even a moral choice in most cases. So maneuvering around these bizarre times, I think that's a real issue right there. How you focus on your the good things and
or the things that are really important for you to fight, et cetera.
And this is also a recurring theme for me. The time you spend on fighting, the things you're against. Of course, you could also spend on promoting values, right? And of course, if the balance tips too far over to being immersed in negative things, you've sort of lost already. If only because where do you get your fuel anymore, right? And probably we could all, or I'll speak for myself. I could definitely spend more time on good things, as against
Blame Facebook. Just blame Facebook. It whenever there's a question of why you're immersed in negativity, we know you just have to blame Facebook. We'll see if we get to that story later.
This is short. I thought I could blame you.
Oh.
Well, anyway, it's between you and Zuckerberg then, as it's always been, right? Because
You wouldn't know me but for Zuckerberg, so you may as well blame him for the whole thing.
Anyway, so it's all very dystopic these days. So that story, though, about the we hinted at it before, about the so it's not entirely clear to me whether Ms. Hagen actually gave those documents to the New York Times, Washington Post,
there's more revelations
and
about the
Associated
algorithm.
Press.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. I don't want to go into that topic just this second because I want to continue on this disobeying the unjust law.
Apparently, some associations are more equal than others. So
no,
go ahead.
A sliding glance at that topic is okay, but we gotta keep down. So see, I've got these beautiful program notes again at don'tletitgo.com. You can see what I did this morning. I assembled these so neatly. We're going to try to stick to them a little bit here. So let's see here. Okay, so we're going to praise Dan Bongino now. That is next on the agenda because he has done this beautiful thing, I think. Dan Bongino is a radio host, and also he's been a strategic investor in Parler. I'm not exactly sure what the status is now with that, but he is active on Parler as well, and he has sort of filled some of the part of the shoes of Rush Limbaugh, is my understanding. And in particular, he's got Cumulus, that huge radio media conglomerate. Cumulus is broadcasting his show, syndicating it for certain audiences or subsets of the market. And he has told them that he will quit, that he will not let them syndicate his show if the company enforces the vaccine mandate against its employees. Now, we're not talking about kids, obviously. Now we're talking about adults. But I happen to think that the vaccine mandate is wrong to impose on adults. Even if I had a private company that I was in charge of by myself, I would never do it. Of course, I'm at Parler, and our CEO, George Farmer, would never do it. We wouldn't be subjected to the mandate anyway, because we don't have the employee threshold. But, Daily Wire and stuff, a number of companies have stood out, even if they have 100 or more employees, and said, we're not doing this. Cumulus, he says he's going to quit. He's going to pull his show if they enforce the vaccine mandate. So I just want to give kudos to him for standing on principle and doing that. Some people don't feel that they can afford to do it. I saw a very heart-wrenching photo yesterday. It was distributed on LinkedIn, where someone felt that he had to submit to the vaccination because otherwise he would lose the job that was allowing him to support his family for 14 years. And you see this picture, he's actually, people did like, oh, I'm getting the jab, when it was voluntary, then you make this decision, and maybe you don't feel so perfect about it because you are worried about the long-term effects of the vaccine, whatever, but you think, okay, I'm doing this, so it's kind of brave, whatever. But anyway, people would take those pictures. Here he is, he's getting this picture. He doesn't have his face, he's anonymous. But you see him getting the jab, and he's holding up a piece of paper, and on the paper it says that he's doing it under protest. And the only reason he's doing this is because he's been threatened with losing his job by which he's supported his family for 14 years. Again, this is a vaccination that, while it has shown effectiveness to prevent some hospitalizations and some deaths for people, significant number, it has not stopped people from getting it and spreading it. So I think the idea that the unvaccinated are posing a risk to you is a ridiculous thing. And certainly in a society where we live and let live so long as other people are not violating our rights. And this is a disease with a very low lethality. This is a vaccine that has a very short track record. There's no way we should be mandating this for people. And I applaud Dan Bongino for standing up, using whatever power he has against Cumulus to say that they should not be enforcing a vaccine mandate. No, nothing to add to that one.
No, well, yeah, you'll tell me that I'm wandering off the
reservation.
the organized path of the program notes. No, but obviously, if once you accept this type of reasoning of we're from the government and we are managing this this pandemic in such and such a way. And we think we have control over the numbers. We have all these models, etc. And of course, they turn out to have been wild or informed guesses or somewhere in between after. Of course, by the same line of reasoning, what is next? And the whole point demonstrated, I think, with this this type of virus that by itself is doesn't have a terrible lethality rate, is rather something else that we should take our health seriously, and that is not a matter of taking a pill or taking a shot once in a while. So that is where I understand that some companies, it's sort of a snake oil, right? I have this one little bottle and it'll solve all your problems. You just take a spoonful a day, and it's such nonsense. It's such nonsense. So that's where, sure, kudos to Dan Bongino, and it would do a whole lot more good if they would say, obligatory exercise for everybody, half an hour a day,
Right.
So
something that has a long-term track record and is an intervention that is temporary, that we know that, I mean, if somebody said, hey, you're making me into an athlete and I've never wanted to be an athlete and that's terrible, it's temporary for the time that you're there with the employer. And if you really hate exercise that much, you don't have to work at that company. But here we're talking about, again, something very new in terms of technology. It might be the greatest thing ever. It might be. We don't know. And that's the thing I want to talk about here with respect to the kids vaccine. What is going to happen right now is on Tuesday, the FDA Advisory Committee is going to look at a briefing, and consider whether to authorize the vaccine. And, we'll talk about what that means in a second, but authorize the vaccine for ages 5 to 11. And of course, by the vaccine, there's only one that's a candidate for this, which is the Pfizer. So as far as we know, the only one that's going to be authorized for kids 5 to 11 is going to be Pfizer. Parents would have no choice. There's just one favored brand. But moreover, we already know from Greg Newsom's announcement, and then we also, it's not Greg, Gavin. How could I forget that name, Gavin? He looks like a Gavin too. Gavin.
Excuse yourself to a bunch of Gavins out there who've been profoundly offended.
Oh, it's true. It's true.
Anyway, so go on.
So Gavin. Anyway, Newsom, gruesome. I'm sorry, Gavins. Anyway, Gavin Newsom. He has already announced that he's going to be mandating the vaccination for kids. He's not happy with me because I heard all the Gavins in the world.
No. Well, so on a more serious note, no. But again, this to me, it exemplifies the dropping of logic, really, that we've seen the past year and a half. Why
are they mandating
why
it?
consider it for a demographic? Let's objectify them, right? A demographic that is clearly not at any serious risk. What's the sense? Why is this even considered?
No,
So-
and so one thing I've stuck in the program notes is it's actually an opinion piece that built on the original New York Times article. The original New York Times article is going to be behind a paywall, but in the program notes at don'tletitgo.com, I have an opinion piece that's from Newsweek that's not behind a paywall, where you can get the gist of what the New York Times article said. The New York Times article talked about a British study, I believe, that described the fact that the risk from coronavirus to unvaccinated kids of this age range is less than the risk of coronavirus to fully vaccinated 70-year-olds. And so just putting this into perspective, the risk really to kids in the way that the opinion piece, of course, describes it, is minuscule. And the upshot is, why would you be mandating a vaccine for something that the risk is so minuscule?
And again, this really goes counter to a couple of very costly lessons we've learned about the way we raise our children. That is, being overly protective in the sense of disinfecting their whole environment makes them more vulnerable. So the medicalization of raising children, which is a good term, of course they're born vulnerable. So what you do is you help them become stronger. And rendering them dependent on pills certainly isn't what we've learned about mistakes, again based on the best intentions. But it's the road to hell that's
that's
paved,
where I think I'm having a hard
with
time
those.
thinking that there's good intentions even with this, right? Like, what are you doing for the kids in this situation?
Well, okay, so but it becomes an intrinsicist wet dream, because first you imagine you have this terrible scare, and then you have this magical wand called Pfizer, and it will make it all disappear. And so you get invested in that fantasy, and you no longer observe the underlying facts. So using that wand becomes a good thing by itself. I think it's sort of what happens.
So you just think that basically they've gone down this path, and then just going a little bit further down the path is going to maybe get us further. What I feel is, it's something that you've raised in previous shows, is the fact that the immunologists and the virologists, the experts that have been, doing a lot of the discussion, that they are thinking about population as a whole all the time.
Well, that's why I made the reference before. It's a demographic.
Yeah.
So, well,
so it's a collectivist thinking.
Yeah, sure.
And the interests of the individual children are supposed to give way.
No, sure, sure, fair enough. I mean, once your policy goals are we must reach 85% of the general population, then you realize,
even though that does nothing, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, but so, and then they realize the limits to the effects of reaching, the goal number 1 and 2, the ambition becomes not to, to deal with the limits of their policy, but we have to increase the numbers even more. So at a certain point, within that logic, you have no choice but to, hey, wait a minute, what's that missing bracket? It's the children. We have to get the children too.
You're supposed to look at children as disease vectors or something.
Yeah. I think that's sort of the, the path of limited logic, or, it's just not scientific in the sense that it's not inductive, right? It's incapable of learning from experience, but it has these floating goals, and then if the goals prove unproductive, or reaching the goals proves unproductive, there's an inability of
sunk cost fallacy, really, in effect, right? Kind of going down the same path. Sunk cost fallacy, you've heard that one?
Yeah, but if you want to elaborate.
Okay, so the idea is you're so far down this path towards this goal,
and
you've done it pursuing a certain means that you couldn't imagine stepping back and changing strategies at that point.
I think there's certainly a psychological dimension in that respect. Why, why don't the experts admit that they were wrong or told a little lie at some point, right? So they become, I think, also inebriated with the prominence, right. And in love with the attention, and then it becomes very hard to admit that you might have been wrong. And I mean, gee, we've all been wrong once or twice. So that in itself, it shouldn't be such such a touchy issue.
No. So, the way it stands now, they're going to review this brief on Tuesday. And I put review in scare quotes, mainly because of another story that came out this week. I've got the link again in the program notes, don'tletitgo.com. It is, the headline is White House details plans for vaccinating children ages 5 to 11. It's a story from The Hill. And in there, they talk about the fact that they're going to recruit, some experts put the word as enlist, I kid you not, enlist pediatricians and children's hospitals to encourage parents to get the vaccination for their kids. In that article, it talks about the fact that our federal government has already laid down the money for all the doses required.
Your money's in, folks.
Your money, which doesn't even exist because they're having to borrow into infinity money that doesn't exist and will never exist in order to pay for it. But it's a mortgage on your life, essentially. The government has already mortgaged your life to pay for vaccination doses for all these kids for this vaccine that isn't even supposedly yet authorized. Okay, so I'm telling you, Tuesday is a formality. In the brief, I have not read the whole brief. I was scanning through it. It was making me ill because I was imagining, as I'm reading through the brief and their data about the safety of their vaccine, I was reading, in this age group, we gave such and such dosage. It was like 3 dosages, and the unit, I can't remember the unit, but all I know is that the adult dosage of the Pfizer vaccine is 30. In the age group of 5 to 11, they gave some kids 30. Why you would ever give the adult sized dose to that. Maybe only because the 30 has proven to wear off too quickly in the adults now, so they know a little bit more. Maybe we'll rationalize for them. But they gave 10, 20, and 30. And then they talk about the side effects that have existed in each of the groups. First dose, second dose. And just as I was reading that, it was making me pretty sick to my stomach, putting kids through this. Anyway, I guess they volunteered, right? At least the kids volunteered, but the parents volunteered them. So anyway, I don't know. Okay, calm down. But then there's this part of it. And I think whoever it was over at Rob Wolf's Healthy Rebellion who pulled this out and took one for the team. There's a passage in there where they talk about the fact that the study was so small, the study that gave rise to this briefing that they're going to review on Tuesday. The study was so small that they are unable to draw any conclusions about the risk of myocarditis, pericarditis in this age group, and that they plan post-authorization to conduct long-term studies and follow for 5 years and the blah, 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 blah. Okay. And you know, when people tell me there's no difference between mandating this vaccination and all the other vaccinations that are mandated for kids right now, I say BS. And I say BS because all of those vaccinations that are mandated for kids, flu vaccine is not mandated for kids, not anywhere I go.
Well, not for adults either.
No, not for adults either. These vaccines have a long track record. You can see safety over the years. You also know that the diseases involved in these mandatory vaccinations are way more serious than COVID, right?
But for me, it represents the complete the fact that people have really gone nuts, because you realize that 2 years ago, the right to try, right, was this bold and daring step for certain cases that was okayed by Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And then within 2 years, basically, maybe 2.5 years, we've passed to this situation where stuff that has not been tested over a serious
is being
amount of time is mandated.
Yes,
so
yes.
how illogical can it get?
And on kids.
Well, yeah.
And on kids.
So
you know.
No. So right to try, absolutely. But since when is this? Are we even considering this?
Yeah. So the problem for me, right, is that in normal situation, you'd say, okay, there's already an FDA. If you're a real free market person, you don't even think that there should be an FDA that's in charge of it, right?
Yeah,
but,
okay.
But assuming,
there would still be, similar organizations, similar private organizations that would weigh the risks and would
give a recommendation of some kind.
Well, yeah, of course, because insurance companies are involved, right?
Right.
So it would be perhaps stricter. The practical outcome would be stricter in certain cases,
right?
And less restrictive in others, where I guess you would have to sign a waiver that you won't be able to hold accountable the person prescribing it, or or let's say
that's what a full right to try
the pharma company,
be,
right. In this case, it's all these governments that have signed a waiver for you
that we can't even read.
That we can read, but they have signed a waiver. Yet they are also grabbing the power to force people to. And so first they sign away your rights to sue, and then you have no choice but to take it too. So that's
so this is why it's a concern, right? So
bizarre.
you say, okay, given the FDA exists, whether or not they authorize a particular vaccine for kids. In this case, you know, it wouldn't be so controversial, except for the fact that that authorization is going to automatically result in mandates in California and potentially elsewhere, mandates for the kids. So it's one thing to authorize it for the ages 5 to 11, but the reason that this is so emotionally charged is because we see the writing on the wall, and we see that, for instance, the Biden administration, having already mortgaged all of our lives into the future in order to already pay for the dosages that they say are required to vaccinate all of the kids in the entire country in this age group. It says it right there in that Hill article that they've already purchased it, even before it's been authorized. You know the mandates are coming. The mandates are coming, and maybe if you're in a state where there's going to be top cover, as I like to call it, the governor's fighting against these mandates, maybe your kids are going to be spared. Maybe not. Maybe there's going to be other things that you're going to have to do to fight the mandates if you don't want your child vaccinated with this. But, you know, again, it's one thing to authorize it. It's quite another thing to mandate it. You know, again, the risk to kids from this disease is minuscule. The vaccines have not been proven to stop any spread. And even if it did, what is the answer? The answer is you protect yourself. You get your health in order, because we do know that it's metabolic conditions of people that are the biggest risk factor to severe COVID, and that particular metabolic and immunocompromised conditions cannot even be helped by this vaccine. Okay, we just saw Colin Powell die from this. The fact that some people are unhealthy and at risk of suffering from severe vaccines does not mean you should be forcing vaccines with no track record on kids. Okay, soapbox off. There's one other thing for you to think about, and again, it's in the program notes at don'tletitgo.com. You will have to weigh these things for yourself, right? There's a couple things here. You just go weigh them for yourself. I just offer them, and you can, you know, do your own research. One of them is from Alex Berenson's Substack, and the headline is "COVID vaccines will keep you from acquiring full immunity even if you are infected and recover." So if the idea is, well, the vaccines don't give you complete full immunity, you can still catch breakthrough COVID, then you might think, well, my consolation is that I can have both. I can have the vaccine-induced immunity and I can have the natural immunity. But the studies are showing that, at least with respect to certain components of natural immunity, the so-called N antibodies, that those are dramatically reduced in people who have the vaccine-induced antibodies, which makes 100% perfect sense, because our body's only concern is to fight off the invader. And if you have put into your body something that is going to help it fight off one aspect of the invader, and you know, you've got the so-called, I think they're called S antibodies out in the world. If you've got the S antibodies, your body's going to say, well, I don't really need those N antibodies. I don't need to make those because I've got these S ones and they're doing that job. I don't know with respect to the other components of natural immunity, whether you would develop all of that to as robust an extent as you would if you were unvaccinated, get infected and recover. These are, again, all things for you to research for yourself, but keep in mind that it is quite possible that if you are vaccinating yourself or your children, that you are taking away from yourself or your children the opportunity to develop full, robust natural immunity. And that's in addition to whatever side effects, short or long-term, might come your way because of the vaccine. One more thing for you to think about, again, think about it for yourself. I put it in the terms of the fact check from the USA Today. The FDA recently approved for the first time an oral blood thinner for children. And the fact check says it is not related to the Pfizer vaccine. Well, maybe it's related to the J&J vaccine. I don't know. The timing is interesting. It was just a few weeks ago, they approved this blood thinner, oral blood thinner to give to children. My guess is because they anticipate as they roll out these mandates that we are subjecting many of our children, again, for no good reason. Sorry, I want to get off the soapbox. I'm mad, but anyway, subjecting them to the risk of blood clots. And
maybe
they're going to fix it with another pill with more side effects. And I want to know which crony. I haven't even looked at the article to see which crony is.
So maybe we can add another link to the notes later, because I realized we talked about the Alzheimer drug, right? And if you look at how they obtained approval for something that wasn't clearly demonstrated as or not scientifically demonstrated as being clearly helpful. It was really bizarre, and the whole emergency approval is a very dubious process. So maybe we could toss that in after.
Okay, I'll see if I can find that and throw it in there. There's one other thing to think about in connection with the new excitement about approving blood thinners. Okay, the headline that I have is, of course, blood thinners for children, and the following story is not necessarily related to only children, but I think there's a rabbit hole here that can be dug into a bit deeper. And it is this: what is going on with the new aspirin recommendations? What is aspirin? Besides, I mean, it does all sorts of things, but one of the things it does is thin blood.
Well, yeah. That's why it has been. That's terrible.
Yeah. So now you made the connection that I made, right? You just made the connection that I made. So what this article, I'll click on this. I'll click. You already know the story, right? You know the story. So the story is, and this is from Slate. Aspirin over the years has been recommended as a blood thinner that's going to prevent cardiac disease, et cetera, et cetera. And then the question was, what dosages are you taking? It the baby dose or the bigger dose, whatever, right? But it was always understood that this is anyway. Apparently now that I don't know what's going on out there, maybe there's a new blood thinner that's not just for kids, but also for adults that some pharmaceutical companies going to get rich on. Aspirin's, been around forever, not under patent. A lot of people joke that aspirin would not be approved by the FDA if it were up for review today, because it's this weird, mysterious thing that's been around for 150 years or more, I guess, right?
Well, they use it for horses, right? But that's a silly joke. But
everything's for horses, right? But in any event, the article is about the fact that they are now not recommending it as much. And I just thought that was curious that I was coming across it as I was going down the rabbit hole of the issue of blood thinners, newly minted approvals of blood thinners for our kids, which should not, our kids should not be needing these things in any way, shape, or form. So that's what I have in this topic. The thing I want to say, though, in terms of any kind of a call to action, if you have decided that maybe you will, maybe you won't obey, and let's back up a sec. Suppose more information comes out. I don't think there's enough information that is going to come out in the short term that would convince a lot of people that they need to be vaccinating their 5 to 11-year-olds in any sort of urgent way. But suppose that information did. Suppose you decided that obeying the vaccine mandate was actually the best thing for your child because new information came out and somehow you were convinced. Okay, fine, that's fine. But suppose you still thought that it was appropriate to speak out against this mandate. And I would say at the very least, it would be appropriate to speak out against this mandate. One forum in which you can do it, I doubt it's going to be listened to because, as I said, I think Tuesday is a rubber stamp. But there is a link under which you can provide public comment to this FDA advisory committee that's going to meet on Tuesday. I am considering submitting some sort of comment myself, but I would urge you, if you believe that even, whether or not you're going to choose to obey this law, which I believe is unjust. Again, you have to do your thinking for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to think. But if you decide it's unjust and you do think it's important enough to speak out about, you do have an opportunity to do it with the FDA it directly. And that is up, I think, until the 25th on Tuesday. You can do that at the FDA's website, the FDA Advisory Committee. So I want to say that we have more program notes at don'tletitgo.com, but we are over time. And so what I want to do is table the next chunk of stories until next week, because it's really the topic that is going to kind of dominate the push towards controlling your life next, which is climate change. There was an article in the Lancet this last week that apparently, and I haven't read the article yet, I've got some reporting that's on it here in the program notes, but this article talks about climate change as being bad for human beings on a variety of fronts. It's bad for our environment in a number of ways, but then it also is somehow implicated in the spread of viruses like the coronavirus, et cetera. So, imagine if all you had to do in order to solve all the world's problems, all the threats against you, was to reduce your carbon emissions, change your diet, don't eat meat because there's too much, right? The cronyism and the totalitarian agenda behind that sort of reasoning is the next place that I see all of this going. That you've said it before, I did certainly, but probably before a lot of people. You knew that this is where it was going next. A lot of people are talking about it. So I want to talk about that probably next week if you're up for that.
We're just rolling around in the worst of the stories. I think I'll spend my the rest of the week on happier things, if you don't mind.
The rest of this next week? Yeah. No, of course. We're here fighting the battle, and then yeah. But no, you want to have a whole story of it's gonna be a whole show of positive stories. We can do that.
No. But maybe this is a good deal. So an hour a week on fighting back, and the rest on building back better.
Are we allowed to even say that? I don't know if we're allowed to say that. A couple bits of just decent news in terms of other places where better ideas are getting out there in the world. I was on the Lars Larson radio show this week.
I thought we were closing.
I'm closing. I'm closing with just plugs. These are plugs for cool stuff out there in the world. I was on Lars Larson, so I got to talk a little bit about Free Speech Week, etc., and talk about the New York Times. The New York Times tried to publish a little hit opinion piece against Parler, and we got to push back not just on a forum like the Lars Larson show, but in the New York Times itself. George Farmer, our CEO, had a letter to the editor published in the New York Times, and you can find that at the link at don'tletitgo.com. You should be able to read it, even though it's in the New York Times, because you guys don't stop following me, but I'm a subscriber to the New York Times. I know you're clicking dislike right now, right? Please don't do that. Don't click thumbs down on my video because I am a subscriber to the New York Times. I am. But what that allows me to do, and this is very clever of the New York Times, it allows me to share with you up to 10 articles per month as part of my subscription. And so that you don't have to deal with the paywall, you can actually read it. So as I understand, if you click that link at my blog at don'tletitgo.com, which says George Farmer, letter to the editor, published in New York Times, you either are going to be taken directly to that letter, or you're going to have to click a link that has to do with Parler in order to get to that letter in all the letters that they have there. I tried to give you a direct link. I don't know if I succeeded in that. It works on my computer. It may not work on yours. If it dumps you at the top of the letters, then look for the link to the one that mentions Parler, and you'll get to read a very nice letter from George Farmer. Very good that the New York Times published that. And then finally, I've got JP's latest video at the bottom. It just came out as I was making my program notes today, so I put it there. Drug companies don't fund the media. Yeah, that's JP in his character as a news broadcaster. It's one of these, again, that's pretty sobering in terms of the amount of cash. You know, I was talking about this the other day, by the way. The issue of Pfizer sponsoring all of these news shows. And the guy says, well, they always sponsor, you know, companies sponsor, what's the big deal? In this case, again, we know that all of us have had our lives mortgaged in the form of supposed tax dollars that may come someday to the government. Those are funneling to Pfizer, and then Pfizer is funneling them to the news outlets that are supposed to be dispassionately telling us what's good or bad about the vaccines or anything else, influencing, no doubt, the content of those broadcasts. And so, in effect, our lives are being mortgaged in order for these news broadcasters to engage in propaganda.
Yeah, it's a perpetual monopoly.
Yeah.
Set up for eternity.
But so what's the good news? The good news is JP is speaking out against it right there in that video in a fun way. So I hope you enjoyed that. Everybody, I'm going to come back over to the chat and see if we have, oh, thank you, Bree. Let's look at this super chat here over in the chat at YouTube. Nothing since the invention of fire has extended human life more than the vaccines. The only reason we think it should take years to approve vaccines is because of the indecency of the FDA. Okay, that is fine, because I'm not against vaccines. I've gotten vaccines. I've even gotten the flu vaccine in some years. What I'm against is the mandate. I'm against the mandate. So again, if in this case in particular, we saw a bifurcation between approval and mandate, I wouldn't be as outraged. I don't know that I would actually approve a vaccine for kids on so little data myself, and I'm going to leave that to the experts. That's that's one question. The other is the mandates.
Yeah, well, it has to be in proportion to the risk. Otherwise, I think it's insane.
Yeah. And I'm not convinced that it's in proportion to the risk.
Nope.
Thank you guys, everybody.
Bye-bye.
And we're going to let you go next week. Maybe some better news next week. I'm hoping, but we got climate change.